Hi, it's Liam here. I'm from the Community Learning Disability team on the Wirral. I'm joined by Mrs. Bray. Today we'll be discussing her son, Jack, autism and diabetes, life living with Jack, the diagnosis of having diabetes, the struggles that come with that, fighting for the diagnosis, attending appointments, reasonable adjustments were not met, and life after it, really adapting to change with diabetes, I guess. So I'm joined here by Mrs. Bray.
Hello, Liam.
You okay?
Yeah, my name's Bev. You can call me Bev.
Beverly Bray, that was it. So yeah, I guess, you discussed with me before about in the Lake District before I moved to the Wirral.
Yes, Jack was diagnosed around about 2.5 in the Lake District. Absolutely not a clue. And we were quite isolated. And so, to be honest, there was a gap between my eldest son and Jack. And I just thought maybe it's because it's quiet, we're isolated, but the language just wasn't coming on, and the milestones, and also meltdowns, throwing himself on the floor, and really genuinely getting agitated and anxious over everything really. But I gave it a turn and put him into a little nursery just at the top of the lane. He hadn't been in there 5 minutes. It was a morning nursery and the special eds teacher was at the door. The special eds person that went round the nurseries, and she came in and she said that she'd been observing Jack. She has autism. Prior to that, we'd done a hearing test. He'd been pulled for a hearing test and it was stopped mid-flow. She said, I can't go on any further because he doesn't appear to be understanding what I'm asking of him. I'd been passed around a bit as well to ICANN and different things, and Jack was getting called unusual. And so when she stopped it, I said to her, off the record, what do you think? And she said, well, I'm not a specialist in that subject, but I think he might have Asperger's syndrome. And I said, what's that? Looking back now. And she said, it's like a form of autism. And my head said, oh, he's not like Rain Man. No. Because that's all I knew.
Yeah.
That's all I knew. So all that was going round. But I have to say, it's always fascinated me. So I had my good old bawling session when I came out of there. In the meantime, the special eds had kept things going within the nursery. And people started coming on board to assess Jack within the nursery and at home, and to see, what it was like in all the situations really. And yeah, he was diagnosed. At that time, we also went to CDC development clinic before that diagnosis. And he was in there for initially 6 weeks, and then they pulled him back because he was just all over the place, throwing himself on the floor, and so they kept him on for longer. And we watched through a window while they were undertaking the assessment really. But I'm a bit of a writer, so prior to me going I'd written down everything, because when I get anywhere I forget and I come out and I wish I hadn't forgot. Yeah. So I wrote and gave, and she said that actually that was very helpful, and they would assess him. And anyway, to cut the story short, Jack was assessed and diagnosed at that time with language disorder, autistic spectrum disorder. We left with no information. That was it then, really. So then the nursery was really getting tougher and tougher, to be honest. And Jack, they had, I can remember it now, an old computer, and he used to hog this computer. He never wanted to get involved in story time or sitting in with the crowd, with all the children. And if anyone approached him on the computer to have a turn, he was like growly and looking and not impressed, and he wouldn't come off it. Looking back, he went through about 4 supports within that nursery, and the supports were on because he was under 3. So we hadn't got into looking for 4 supports at that point. But he did end up, he got a full statement from there. But they kept leaving because they couldn't cope and they couldn't bring him to do anything. And they go outside, every day was sort of the same ritual. They go outside for play, and everyone would go back in, and they couldn't get Jack back in. And they hadn't been taught how to get him back in. And I'd come round, and Jack would be outside. As he knew being able to go, no, we couldn't get him back in. And then one day, after numerous, and he came to apologise and said, I'm sorry, but we just don't know what to do with him. We just don't understand him. We can't stay and do the job because we don't know how to deal with it. A new lady came on. It was about a week into it, and she phoned me and she says, I don't care if I lose my job, but Jack's just been locked in a porch and I'm not standing to watch that. He was extremely sensory. So with the sand play, he wouldn't put his hands in sand play. He didn't like to go and wash his hands for the toilet, the water. And what has happened, they queued up for playtime, to wash their hands, to go to dinner. And he was melting down. And the person in charge, who was a Senko at the time, said, I can't cope with this. And apparently they opened the porch door and locked him in it. So immediately I knew, no, that's not the right place, and went to look at other schools. And bizarrely, it was an open plan school, mainstream. At this point, he'd been assessed, and he's, going through the assessments, beg your pardon, for a statement to be able to support him. And they said, we didn't think we'd had children with autism in school. And we were saying, no, we can't take pupils. And then she said, we realised that actually we did have them and we didn't know we had them. So they took Jack and they had a special ed teacher within the school. And so things were easier in the respect of I wasn't battling with people who didn't know what they were doing. And Jack went through stripping his clothes off with the sensories. So the car would be pulling up to pick him up, and I'd be dressing him with his uniform, and he'd be taking everything back off, and I'd be back on again because I could see the car coming. And he went into school and he started to try to do that because they knew what they were doing. They nipped that in the bud. And if I had one piece of valuable information, if somebody had said to me to go all those years back, would be whatever you teach them on the way from day dot, make sure it's what you want to happen when they're adults, because it never changes. Or if you try to change it, it's really hard, really hard.
Routine of it.
Yeah. So from there, we stayed in that school, and then we decided to move back up to Wirral. My dad, who was getting older, back we came. There was no room in special eds in Wirral at the time, and I was told he'd have to go into a mainstream, and which he did. But I was told that I would have to go along and chat to the headmaster, because he'd never had anyone with autism in a school before, and see what he felt about that. And so we went to a little local school. Again, the support. I'd never been on with anybody with autism before. And my statement was transferred from the Lakes to Wirral. It was a one-to-one support. She had to learn on the fly. It was quite tough. Jack, again, he didn't like to go into assembly. He had a habit then, when he was anxious, of throwing himself on the floor. He didn't have big language on board at all at that point. It was all like key words to Jack. He used to get up close and personal, and so there was little methods devised. This little support was so great in many ways. She had a piece of string. I can still remember that to this day, to show him this piece of string between her and him to where he had to stop, not be in people's faces, because he used to get really close. He didn't know the boundaries of, how far you stand away from somebody. But it wasn't just the language, it was the understanding as well. But he was really, really clever at disguising that. And people would say to me, oh, yes, he understands every word. Bev, he understands every word. And I would say, no, he doesn't. He's picking out keywords. He's picking out, so if I, for example, go and get me the milk out of the fridge, Jack grasp, milk and fridge.
Yeah.
The middle bit didn't matter to him. The middle.
It's very easy for staff to then overestimate him, isn't it?
Yeah. And of course, you can't see it, so it's not there. And so they're asking more of him than he understood at the time. It was quite hard because the classes were big. And if it's to take a leap forward we got to the year before he was due to come out to go to big school. He was coming home and he was hitting his head with his hand and saying, I'm stupid. I knew that, I don't know, being his mum, there's just that, no, it's hard to explain, but I just knew it wasn't I'm stupid. He couldn't tell me that, Mum, the class is too big and I'm not understanding what's going on in this class now. There's a passing of the ways and I'm not getting it. But the only way he could relate that to me was to say, I'm stupid. And I started looking around for other schools well in advance of him being transitioning. So I went around looking for schools for Jack. And to cut the story short, found a wonderful school on the Wirral who treated Jack as a person, involved him in everything. School was a whole different ballgame to primary school, where we've had a lot of problems really, of trying to get him engaged in it. Things that were just, for an example, when he went into the secondary school, we did really work hard at the reading when he was in primary and that. And so when he went into secondary, they gave him Bart Simpson books to engage him, because he literally, the first day, and it went on for months, just would fold his arms and put his head on the desk and just literally go, boom, melt down to this. It was just too much overload of everything. And so they built his confidence up with all the fun things. Jack's a cartoon, avid cartoon. I think that's what I found funniest most of all him was, before he was diagnosed, I thought I had a gifted child because he used to recite paragraphs of things, but then he couldn't speak a sentence. And he used to stop and rewind, cartoons, Disney.
Watch them on repeat.
Stopping and starting. You never sit and watch a full movie with him because he stops it there. And even now, he'll put subtitles up for things because the speech is too fast. Jack finds it difficult to sit in a group of people because he can't pick up. But he can tell you that now. He can't say that now. But when he was little, he couldn't. And he just finds things overwhelming. And when we're off to the doctors, for an example, he's got his headphones on, and I always say, do you want to talk, Jack? And no, you can do it. I'm doing the child. He wants to tune out. He doesn't want the stress of that doctor's appointment. It's too much for him. But he can recognise that about himself. But I think looking back when he was younger, he clearly couldn't. And the anxiety made most of the appointments that we ever had to attend really quite difficult. Leaping forwards, we went through transition. Prior to that, Jack's got really rigid diet right through. He did eat fruit and then he just stopped, just completely stopped. Even when we've got to notice, we've had lots of people through who've had eating problems and we've been able to help them, they still couldn't deviate him from what he was happy to eat, and that was that. But no matter what I did, he never felt full. So he'd have his meal and he'd be back at me, I'm hungry. And I would relay that, in the paediatric appointments. Nobody seemed to pin two and two together to look any further through that reason. I think they just maybe thought that was maybe an autistic trait. I don't know, looking back. But when he was diagnosed with the diabetes and I started to look in, to how to help him, one of the big things was a constant appetite. Then the penny dropped then.
So what age was that around then? You had the inkling about diabetes?
He came out in a rash. But he had been drinking a bit more than normal. And then this funny rash things started coming out, like little clusters of bumps in between his toes, on his legs, and a bit on his back. And that was like the clue. And I went online, called up all, but I'm looking through all the different, and I saw this, and I thought, oh no, I think he's got diabetes. My husband came home and I said, oh, you're never gonna, I'm sure Jack's diabetic, you know. The worst thing ever to happen to anybody, but somebody, particularly like Jack, at that point, he was so needle phobic. Going for needles isn't a weekly affair. It's not something that is in your routine. It's not something, it's fear. A lot of people are feared of needles. It was our worst nightmare, to be honest, at that time. But Jack, as a person, didn't change. There was no health looking. So it was subtle, very subtle, till that rash came out and gave me the clue. And even to the point of when I took him to the GP, I saw a nurse and she said, I said, he's got this rash. And she said, molluscums. And I said, well, no, I don't think it is molluscums. I think he's diabetic. And so she said, well, the only problem with that is we need to get bloods, and he's needle phobic. And I said, well, please can we start with a urine sample here and now? And she come back and she said, it's like full of glucose. And away we went then.
Yeah, it's a good indicator, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose when there'll be people out there, I guess, who the sons or the daughters who are needle phobic, as you said, and with the autism, they may put off going to GP, mightn't they?
Yeah, because I was one of those, because we'd try and go for other needles, and I'd book it all, and I'd get that cream, you know, and all the things I needed to have to do. You get quite nervy about it, and I'd say, no one's forcing you, no one will ever force you, and we wouldn't get there. This rash appeared, but prior to that, Jack had been having a puffer. From leaving school, he was allowed a puffer for the flu jab. This was great, because it meant he was covered, and he wasn't having to get into that state over the needles. And then we weren't allowed to have it because he was 18 and it was needle only. We went along to the nurse was undertaking it, and we went along, and I went in the headspace of the puffer, and she produced the needle, and Jack flew out the door, and I said, oh no, he's needle phobic, we have a puffer. And she said, no, we can't have that now. And I said, but can we have some reasonable adjustments? You know, he's autistic, he's learning disabled, and he's needle phobic. And she said, no, we can't have it now, he's got to have the needle. I said, well, please would you find out? So she went out to talk to a colleague, and she come back and she said, not. Anyway, no way was Jack having that, so we came out without him having anything. And then I tried to remake, I came home and had a little look up to see, you know, was he able to have that? And public health information said that yes, under reasonable adjustments, that was, you know, able to do that. So I produced the information. It was met with making a best interest decision about Jack, and basically not to have anything. And I just couldn't understand that. Also, I didn't like the idea he's had a best interest made without himself or myself in the equation, the two of us. So I wanted to pursue that, but meantime the nurse gave me a number or a referral to the learning disability team. Was I like that? Yes, I was. I said, you know, to try and help him out with these needles. This was all prior. I'm getting a bit confused, but this was all prior to him and us noticing about the diabetes. Anyway, wonderful team came on. So patient Jack, got to know him on our own territory. Massive difference, community, so different to getting to a surgery with other people and strangers and all the things that, you know, distract and stress. So they're working to get Jack through and being, you know, not being phobic. We got the I think he missed out on a needle that year, or on the puffer that year, because of all the carry on.
Yeah.
But squirreling away was the learning disability team on Jack, and then this diagnosis of diabetes, and of course he has to have blood stand on, doesn't he?
Yeah. So yeah, in a nutshell, really, the GP refused to allow Jack to have the puffer for the flu jab. Made a best interest decision on his own. Really, no one else present decided he was to go with nothing. A referral was made to our community learning disability team, and one of our nurses got involved to
Yes.
do some desensitisation work with Jack around needles, and that was helpful.
Helpful, extremely helpful. The first, now this was we've gone from having a needle to a blood take, which is two completely different things. And the first time took an hour and a half, and we just sat there, and there is no way without that reasonable adjustment they would have got that blood. There is no way the normal doctor's surgery gears itself up for that. Patience for that. You know, and I understand, you know, they're busy. But that team was so important. I'll always be forever grateful for that, because now we got round to the COVID, Jack went and got his needles like everybody else.
Yeah.
And boy was I proud. But that would never have happened without that service, without their patience, and they are so needed. And I can't stress that enough. And for me to be able to talk to a team and for them to understand is incredible.
Yeah.
It felt incredible, because I feel like, you know, all through I've just done nothing but repeat. Give them vegetables, Mr. You won't eat vegetables. Do this, do that, do the other. And for somebody to come in and understand. And I do believe it is a patience game with people with autism, and it's just a patience game.
Absolutely, yeah.
They can do it, but you have to be patient, and the health service is not a patient machine, as in patience, not patient. There's no time to sit back and do that.
Yeah, and that's where our team are vital, you know, part of the desensitisation work that we've done. It is making a relationship first and foremost,
Absolutely.
isn't it? Is being patient, then there's also forming a relationship,
Absolutely.
gaining the trust. You know, it is like you said, it's a long game, but the results after it are just endless, aren't they? It's helped them so
Because
much.
now we'll go and have a needle. And
I guess with the diabetes, you know, you obviously you would have been worrying, wouldn't you?
Yeah, it's a bit bittersweet, really, Liam, because and I've wanted him in a million years to get diabetes, but then it's a constant. He's got to do bloods.
Yeah.
You know, doesn't like it like anybody else. Always the needle sort of thing, but it's not like it was all the way. It really isn't, and it is all anxiety. It is all about anxiety, and it makes me really proud now the way he can go and do it. And he had his 2 COVID jabs and his booster, you know.
And part of this podcast, like we discussed before earlier, myself and another member, Kirsten, and in the LD team, we're undertaking a diabetes project based on the research around the inequalities people with learning disability and autism.
And here comes
Here's
the man.
Jack.
Do you want
Hey,
to say
Jack.
hello to everybody?
Okay.
Your mum was telling us about how diabetes and how Danny helped you.
Yep.
Danny did a lot of work, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
What did he do with you?
Well, Danny did a little needle on my arm, placed one of those fancy gadgets on me, and placed a little needle on my arm. It hurt for a little while, but if you find something to distract you, like, say, music, cartoons, or the thought of going somewhere super nice, it might distract you from the pain. Trust me, I've learned by example.
Well said, Jack, well said.
Thank you very much.
And you do really well now with your needles, don't you, when you've got to do that?
Yes, I always pay what I want to get if I'm doing the hard stuff.
Yeah, and you do so well. But that was all with the support of the learning disability team, wasn't it?
Yeah.
They're a great team, aren't they? Great team, Bob and Danny.
Yep, great seeing those two. When you got something that'll distract your mind from the pain, you feel that you can accomplish anything.
That's very true.
What I'm trying to say is, if you pursue a little mind over matter, you'll be able to accomplish a little thing like the fear of needles.
That's a great bit of advice, Jack.
It is.
Because that's what it's trying to do, trying to help people overcome. How you felt at the time?
Are you kidding? When I was young, I was terrified of needles. It looked really painful.
And what would you say to somebody who was young and felt like that now?
Oh. I'd say I watch a little cartoon, listen to a little music, go into your happy place, and you might be able to don't feel the pain.
Brilliant bit of advice, love. Brilliant bit of
It is,
advice.
And part of this podcast is about diabetes, and you know you have diabetes, don't you?
I do not have diabetes.
Oh yes, you do.
I do not. You're just keeping me from having more chocolate. And I find that really insulting to me.
Oh, bless you. He does so well.
There you go, be careful, but
Well, I think that's my time for the day.
Well done, Jack.
thank you,
Thank
Jack.
you for that.
No problem.
So yeah, myself and Kirsten, we went round to all the day centres on the Wirral. We've done like a diabetes road show with the help of MenCap. We had a few volunteers who helped us. So how that looked like, we done a bit of training beforehand. We had some willing volunteers, there was around 4 or 5, and we done training around that with the guys for a few weeks beforehand. We create like an acronym, we create our own posters and stuff, diabetes with the symptoms. I liaised with the local day centres on the Wirral Evolutions, and then we went round to each day centre. I think we were about 8 in the end, and we done screening for diabetes, blood pressure, weight, height, and created a BMI.
Brilliant.
And we even made little goodie bags and stuff, and a bottle of water, all
fab.
information sheets
Yeah.
to take home to the carers or parents. And if it was too high, we'd repeat it and let the parents know. So I guess following the diagnosis of diabetes, and obviously the work we've done with Jack around desensitisation with the needles, and that helped massively. What was it like attending appointments and stuff then, going forward with his diabetes? Because you touched earlier when he was younger, the reasonable adjustments weren't there. Now that he's an adult, and I guess with diabetes, you get an influx, don't you? Quite a few then, don't you?
Danny came along to his first appointment, which I felt was really helpful and really useful, which was at a park. And at the time, they were looking what we call, the GP was a bit concerned it might be Modi because of his age. So we went along to the first appointments. That was quite difficult because I didn't know an awful big lot, and I was trying to explain, and I'm not sure that they knew how to ask the questions to Jack. Anyway, I came out from that a bit, right, okay, that's the first go, and where we've got to go from there. So the appointments are fine. We now go to Clatterbridge, but because of COVID, we haven't. It's been phone, yeah. I feel like Jack, again, he can chat if he wants, but he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to entertain with it because it's real life, isn't it? And it sets him up, and he knows that, so he doesn't want to go into that, so he leaves mother to do it. So, but I feel like I have to over-explain all the time, like, Jack won't eat that. And I've come to a plate scenario now where I go, imagine your plate, your veg, your potatoes and your meat. Now take off the veg, now take off the potatoes, and that's all I've got, which is quite tough. Initially, I had to sit down. A big friend of mine was MyFitnessPal, if that helps anybody out there. And I used Jack's height and weight, what calories he should be having, and it gives the nutritional value, and I had to learn a load myself. Like, and the sugars and all that were done for me. And then I had to take Jack's likes and look for a better like, with less sugar and less everything in it really. But it was quite restricting to start with, to get that going. But we did it. We headed off on that trip, but that was a great help to me. So when they asked me did I want to go to see the dietitian, I was on a roll with Jack. Jack's the type of guy, if the dietitian had just sat there and said to him, no chocolate, no this, no that, he just would have switched out. So I asked, would they give me a reasonable adjustment, or back to reasonable adjustments, would they give me a reasonable adjustment and see me? Just for a chat, to tell them what I'd been doing. Because I didn't want to knock him off it, because the numbers were really great, things were going really great, and I just didn't want anything to detour it. So I just basically sat with her and told her what I'd been doing, and she was more than happy. I thought, yeah, carry on with what you're doing. But when I go to the appointments, I feel as though I'm over-explaining myself all the time. Jack, we need veg, Jack, we need... I feel like I'm not relaxed in it. I want to feel more relaxed in it. I don't want to feel judged in it, because the reasonable adjustment comes with Jack's diabetes too, not just the appointments, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
What another diabetic can do, Jack may just dig his heels in and he's not going to do.
Yeah.
So it's down to me to then look for better ways, a bit of bargaining if you like. Well, we do that, you can do that, and we can switch that out. And but there are them times where he's got to go and have a treat. Life is for living. He has to go and like everybody else, out into the streets, and it's really tough because the streets are just full of food. You go to the shops, it's food. You go out down, let's go to New Brighton, everywhere you look, it's a restaurant or a calf or everything, and it's triggering. It's really triggering, and specifically for someone on the autistic spectrum, if that's what they're loving and they're going,
Yeah, and you've got to manage that.
and you've got to manage that, or you're managing your outing on the fact that at the end of it you're going to get that, and then all of a sudden you can't. That you're getting them out to brave them, to get them out into community, and then and we'll go for tea. Then tea becomes different, because then he's got to make different choices within that calf, and it's, as I said at the start, what you've started off with, and it's not just me but others, to get him motivated, was he loved his food. He loved his food. A really hard thing for someone to get, because it becomes obsessive over the food. It's sort of, the world's revolved around the food.
And that's when it's hard to manage with the diabetes, isn't it? You throw diabetes in the mix with that, it's tough, isn't it?
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. But I want to say to everybody, there is light at the end of the tunnel, because Jack was... I thought, how am I going to go with this? And he's done it. Yeah, we can improve. We can always improve. But yeah, we can't... we've got to a place where I never thought we'd get.
Yeah.
And we've got to get better. And I understand that, but it's a whole lot better than where we were. A whole lot better.
It's how you approach it, isn't it, as well, managing, like you said, with his autism, but you're not sitting there telling him no, you are bargaining at times, and things are done in moderation.
Yeah.
But to him, he's still getting it as well, isn't
Yeah.
it? It's tough, isn't it?
For the start of it, I had to change out, like when he was going out with his little personal assistants, for the afternoon or whatever, and I'd have to make a batch of sandwiches up, or something different, so, because where they'd go and have a meal out, I had to stop that to get the bloods into, a range where it was, good, and so that went off, and just those small changes made the difference. But sometimes when it's an appointment, you feel like you're having to explain it. Actually, it's not just like telling somebody else to go, right, you can't have that now. When it's been in their routine, if someone said to me, if you eat, that's going to make you poorly. If you say that to Jack, you go, oh, what do you mean? You know, he's not interested in that side of it. He wants that. Whereas I'd take it away and think about it. It's that moment, that time. He wants that. That's what he likes. I'm proud of where we've got to. It's not easy because it's a lifelong thing. It really isn't easy, but it's easier now. I feel in appointments sometimes people listen, but they don't hear. They don't hear the difficulties. Everyone can sit opposite you and go, right, give them that, don't give them that, do this, do that. And then, but you've got to come home and deal with the fallout of that. So it's planning, really, big time planning, all of the time.
I mean, it's not wanting to change the world, isn't it? But, you know, especially in our team with the Diabetes Project, we've created all easy read documents, you know, like I said, with the diabetes screening, where we've also created online e-learning, a diabetes awareness training session. That'll be going out for all providers to access.
That's brilliant.
Again, it is an awareness, but it's out there, isn't it?
Yes.
So going back to appointments then, you know, following the diabetes, how are things there then?
Well, because of the pandemic, it's been phone.
Oh yeah.
At the minute, we've got a nurse on, but there was it wasn't the usual consultant. He phoned a couple of times, and then a new consultant came on, and she's putting Jack on new medication, and it involves needles or big pills. That's another. Jack can't swallow big pills, so we have metformin. We had to source liquid, and then just recently, going a bit off subject, liquids went all a bit AWOL, so he's now on powders, metformin, and it's all that change all the time, you know, but you've got to be forward thinking all the time. Anyway, she wanted to put him on this specific medication. I just said, oh, it's not going to make him hypo, is it? Because I've got to watch over him all the time. He's not the type of person that'll come into me and go, oh, I'm going faint, mum. You know, I'm feeling funny, mum. However, he started on this medication. I found the appointment a bit, as though she was getting on to give it me. There wasn't any difference. It wasn't an awful appointment, but there wasn't any difference. There wasn't any. You can relate the message to me and what have you, but I'm the third party, if you like. I'm doing it for someone else. I want to hear it. I want to relate it back, so I've understood it. Because I'm the person that's given that person medication.
Yeah, you've got to retain it all.
I've got to give that person medication. His life's in my hands if I do that wrong. What am I to look out for? You know, it's not just as simple as I give it myself and I go, oh, I feel a bit crummy today on that. Oh, is it this? It's him. And he doesn't explain in the way somebody else would. However, we got to a point where we upped the medication and he complained of a headache. Now, that's not something Jack would do if I was having a headache. So, he can tell me. There was a point where they said, you know, they'd be happy with him having bloods around 8 because he'd want him hypoing, which I perhaps looked at then as a reasonable adjustment. Like an older person is falling on the floor, trying to get the bloods to 5.8 or 5.6, and they're going. I wondered that they'd done that for Jack as a reasonable adjustment. But it's also, and I equally understand that it's important for Jack to get his to a level because he's young and it's all the organs that need to be looked after. The better for him. But equally it means me having to all the time be honest, looking for everything. So we've got to get to a place where he can live his life and not be too restricted.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite sure they understand that side sometimes.
We want Jack to still live a meaningful the best life for him,
Yeah.
you know, but at the same time,
Yeah.
you throw diabetes in there, you don't want it to be
It's a
restricted at all.
difficult thing,
Yeah.
it is. So trying to, back in the past, over Jack getting an eye test, there was drops involved in the equation. And I kind of like knew back then he was, you know, he wouldn't be very happy about that. He might not forward think it in my head, what might set him off. And so I thought I'd take it on my own initiative to ring through and double check that, you know, everybody was aware of everything, really, what was going on. And I was given a number to ring to the receptionist. She was almost put out at the fact that I'd rang through and what on earth did I want, you know, and that the optician was, you know, well versed, and why didn't I sit him on my knee? And at the time I said, well, he's like 6'3" and size 12 feet, and it just got into a battle that didn't need to be a battle. And I'm a person that's all for not complaining but learning, and learning's important because that's the next person coming up, and if that helps them, all well and good. And I'd like to think someone would do the same for me, pass me the information. But it all led into a battle that didn't need to be, and things happening along the way. So it's the training, but also every person's an individual too, and what might work for somebody might work for someone else. And I suppose what I'm trying to say is be patient with the carer sitting at the side, as well as the person when they're trying to explain, because it is nerve-wracking. It is nerve-wracking. You don't want to be getting into battle. You just want to help. Well, I did at the time, but I just felt really patronised. I was like, you know, sit down there, mum. You know, I have a name.
Because I mean, I guess you've done the right thing. I mean, you've rang ahead, you've discussed reasonable adjustments are made. In an ideal world, you would have liked the first or last appointment.
It's such a waste of money, Liam. And it's stressing. And then it's such a waste of, there's another appointment. Some years ago he had to have treatments in Alder Hay, and he had to go under for his treatments in general anaesthetic because they just couldn't get in his mouth for tea. But there's always a reason why. And when he was very young, a whole bunch of people jumped on top of him to restrain him to get his teeth done, so that sticks. There's always a back reason why Jack's showing. If his needs a mess, you don't see it. There's a back reason why if he's upset. Same with the needles. Something in the past sets him off. Something that's happened sets him going. And anyway, he was going into Alder Hay, and I busily sat relaying all the things, you know, we'd need to do this general anaesthetic. And when we actually pulled up for the appointment, none of it was put into place. And that particular day, Jack sat very patiently on this bed in his side room. He must have been there for about 2.5 hours, and in the end, he stood up, and it was no more. I'm not waiting. How long are you keeping me here? And the nurses come running down. I said, to be fair, this is ridiculous. You know, we've been sat. I did tell. Let me go and look. They hadn't put it in his notes. They hadn't got a care plan. So he couldn't go in. He couldn't go in because he refused to go in then. He said, I'm not going in. It had gone past itself. So they hadn't prepared. And it failed. Somebody rang and asked what we needed. And the next time he went through, he had his teeth done, and we came out.
Brilliant. I mean, you like to think back now, the world is slightly different. You will get the odd times where the receptionist might not be as aware of reasonable adjustments.
Oh gosh, I mean, yeah.
You know, we hopefully like to think that now.
Yeah.
With the desensitisation work and, you know, like you said, reasonable adjustments, appointments can be done a bit smoother and quicker. So I guess, the moral of it is if we can help anyone, if you have an inkling with diabetes, go to GPs, I guess, any symptoms you see.
Yes, and if they are needle phobic, ask for a urine sample first, because that is a bit of a clue. I know it's perhaps not the place that everybody else starts from, but it did start our ball rolling Yeah, but as I say, there wasn't any signs from Jack, apart from a little bit more drinking maybe. But he wasn't coming in saying he felt funny or tired or any of it. So it's not always that easy to pinpoint it. There it is creeping up. And the thing is as well, at the time, I say to Jack, should we go and have a... I mean, now he'll come and do things, but no, I'm not going out, you know, in that moment in time. So all the things that you need to do, like go your walk and do everything, need prior to that, you know, before, leading up to that, could be a battle.
So I'm glad things are in a better place now.
Yeah, much better now. The needle into his tummy, Ozempic, that would have never have happened.
No.
That would have never have happened. And so it's led to him being able to access a lot more. I mean, when we've gone up to Clatterbridge outpatients, they're all lovely, but there's no reasonable adjustment. He's not separated. Like we go and we sit, you call him through. I'm not sure whether the reasonable adjustment thing, I don't know whether half the time it's flagged up. To be fair, I don't know what's going on. The same in the doctors when we were going through COVID. Nothing was flagged up. Nothing was flagged up for Jack. And then in the second cohort of clinically extremely vulnerable people, Jack got a letter. But prior to that, I had to scream blue murder for Jack to be able to get an injection, a COVID vaccine. So the system's not flagging it up properly, which it's just a bit of prep, isn't it? So, you know, it would help so much more. And that stressed me to death at the time. And they were coming back with, well, no, there's no reason for him to be in, you know, an early cohort. He's not clinically extremely vulnerable. I was like, well, he's overweight and he's diabetic and he's learning disabled and, you know, they're 6 times more likely to die. You know, if that's not good enough reason, I don't know, it's the understanding of it all. If you've got any concerns, you need to get in touch with your GP, speak to them about the teams and who's out there for them, and there needs to be more knowledge that it might be a long term on with the team. You might need that, you might just need that little bit of time, or to be able to talk to somebody that understands and has that patience to get over what you need to get over. But definitely regarding diabetes, if you feel it, keep at it.
Yeah, well, that's a positive to end on. Thanks very much, Bev.
No, you're welcome.
Thank you very much for
You're
that.
welcome.